Is Gary in?
He's in Van Other side.
Oh, okay. There you go. Gary.
The other mayor is working on
Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being patient with me today. Today, the City Council once again, rejected the arbiter's ruling in the case of, or in the cases of, misconducts that really require an open process and transparency. The City Council is still very much committed to that transparent process. As you heard today, there are quite profound interactions that the public has had with law enforcement over the course of decades in this city. And the people of Chicago elected me to bring transformation and transparency to how we handle accusations of misconduct, and that those accusations of misconduct should happen in the forefront, in the public, where people can actually witness it. And so, though there's been a very robust debate around this matter, the decision to keep a very transparent, open process is something that is important to the people of Chicago. So thank you all again for being here today. And with that, I'll take questions.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
I wanted to ask about the rejection of the arbiter's ruling again. Is this something where the city is open to negotiations with the FOP on this? It's something that President John Catanzara said that they're not open to, but I know that the city's attorneys had floated the idea of maybe a compromise with a public arbitration process. What is the city thinking as this goes to more likely to be decided in court?
Well, the city's position is pretty clear, and that decision was confirmed again today, that as we look to regain trust within our communities between our neighbors and law enforcement, that having an open, transparent process will help do that. It's important, as we have seen over the course of at least these first 10 months that I've been in office, that we are working hard to really build and, in some instances, restore confidence between law enforcement and neighbors and residents. And that is a responsibility of all of us. And so today was just affirmation that there is a commitment to a transparent process to ensure that there is a real serious effort to make sure that whatever breakdown that exists between the residents of the city of Chicago and law enforcement, that we work to heal that.
Hey, Mayor. Where is the city in negotiating a short-term extension with ShotSpotter with SoundThinking to the September 22nd deadline? Are you confident that you will get there, or could this technology turn off when the contract is set to expire tomorrow?
Well, I've been very clear from the very beginning around this, and I'm still clear that as we work to give law enforcement time to draw down from this operation, that it was important for me to provide that type of runway. Look, I've made a commitment from the very beginning since I've been in office, is to bring people together so that we can come up with a viable resolution to matters that the people of Chicago care about. And so we've maintained a very clear presentation about what our intentions are, while also making sure that we're very thoughtful with the partner who has been a part of this infrastructure for the last 5 years. But the most important thing is, I don't know if there's anyone that spends more time thinking about public safety than I do. Now, there are other mayors that have been in this position before. I would argue that they had the same level of attention. What my approach has been very consistently, that we have to invest in people. And that's what I've done. And that's what I will continue to do. So thank you.
Conversations ongoing for the contract extension?
As I said, I've been very clear from the very beginning of what this process entails, and that's what the process entails from what I've articulated from the very beginning. Thank you.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This morning, the state and county announced $250 million for the migrant response, but they say there's a $70 million or so gap in what's needed. Does the city have plans to offer that $70 million? If so, what would that look like?
Yeah. So as you know, I've made a very strong commitment. Well, maybe you don't know. I shouldn't assume that. I've made an incredible commitment to this mission. From the first major vote that I oversaw as mayor of the city of Chicago, $51 million. That was a punt from the previous city council. And then we put another $150 million into the budget for this fiscal year, something that the previous city council did not do. They didn't budget for the last year. And then we went back again for a third time to replace government operations funds with the $95 million. On top of that, you know, we've had 35,000 plus people come to the city of Chicago seeking asylum, of which we had at one point the highest 15,000 people that the city of Chicago was solely responsible for sheltering, 5,700 children that we are educating, providing health screenings. I've demonstrated that I'm very much committed to this mission, you know, and there's an entire operation around how this mission is carried out. And so I'm grateful of the work from the state as well as from the county and the work that they have done and what they are committed to continuing to do. And there's an entire operational aspect to this mission that I have to have full consideration of, because I'm, again, solely responsible for sheltering people. We're solely responsible for educating people. And these are, you know, big tasks. And as you know, from the very beginning, since I've taken office, we've decompressed police stations, the airport. There's a lot of work that's involved here. And the city of Chicago has the bulk of that responsibility. And grateful that we have partners like the state of Illinois that have helped resettle families. The county has committed to ramping up its healthcare services at each of our sites, of which 28 of them, I'm running all of them. We're going to continue our work to make sure that this mission is fulfilled.
But Mayor, that doesn't answer the question that there's a $70 million gap. Why did you engage with the state and the county and then refuse to commit?
So I'm engaging with the county and the states because that's what leaders do. I've made a commitment to collaborating with people. There are a lot of things to consider in this entire operation. It's not just financial resources. It's about beds, right? And who ultimately is going to be responsible for the temporary shelter. I remember the state of Illinois committed to 2,000 beds back in November. And we are still working out and fleshing out the details around that, because look, this is a very comprehensive approach. So this is not about my commitment. If anybody questions I'll say it like this: I don't believe anybody in Chicago is questioning my commitment to this mission.
Well, they are, because you didn't put in the $70 million that you promised you would give them at that meeting and then walked away from it.
Were you at that meeting? So you're making an assertion that I made a promise. Were you at that meeting? So $150 million in my budget, $51 million from the first vote that I oversaw when I became mayor, another $95 million to make sure we close out this last fiscal year. So whatever conclusion you're coming to, maybe I shouldn't speak to whatever conclusion you're coming to. All I'm saying is that no one in this city, let's make it broader, no one in the state of Illinois, in this country, is questioning Mayor Brandon Johnson's commitment to this mission. No one is. 28 shelters, 5,700 children that we're educating. 3 times before the city council to get the resources that were needed to make sure that we are fulfilling this mission. Health screenings, collaborating with mayors around the region and the country, passing an ordinance that other states are now modeling so that we can bring some structure to this operation. So I'm committed to this mission, as I've been. And I'm grateful that we have partners at the state level and the county level who are also committed to this mission. And it's a mission of care, as well as a mission that requires a real holistic response to this crisis. And I'm grateful that we have 2 leaders at the state and the county level that are committed to it as well.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor.
Good afternoon.
My question is about the First Police District Council, which has been operating with only 2 district councilors since last May. In November, you rejected the CCPSA's recommendation of Marcel Bright, and your office asked the CCPSA to put one of the other 2 initial names forward, which they did. It's now been 3+ months since then. Why has there been a delay in making that nomination, and when do you expect to do so?
So I've made a recommendation, and we want to get it right. Look, I know that the people have gotten maybe accustomed to things being done in a very rash way. Like when you shut down 50 schools overnight, shut down mental health clinics, or shut down, hold on, I got you, man. You've asked your question. And what I'm simply saying is that I know that people have become accustomed with decisions being made in a way that, quite frankly, have been quite frankly sloppy. We've hurried up to pass deals for parking meters and skyways and public housing. Where has that gotten us? So you have a thoughtful mayor. That's what you have. And so there's a recommendation that has been provided, and so now we're moving forward.
When will you move forward with that?
I've already made my recommendation. Yep, so you'll see that shortly. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sure you heard the criticisms today of the current process as far as police discipline, with the police board making its decisions behind closed doors. Are you open to a more transparent process for these police situations? Do you have one in mind? And what would you like to see come out of this debate?
Yeah. Well, let's start with the last question of your 3. What came out today was a vote. And the city council, once again, rejected the arbiter's decision. So that's thing 1. As far as do I have ideas, of course I'm working collaboratively with our police superintendent, as well as our police officers, as well as the community, which includes the faith community, community-based organizations, to come up with ways in which community safety do not have to center around policing alone. And then for your first question, as far as, the best available transparent process is the one that we're speaking of today. Now, is there room to continue to transform? Absolutely. I mean, you also heard not just the criticism, but you also heard the real life stories of individuals, men and women who have been tortured by law enforcement, and we're still paying the price for that, and so are these individuals who've been deeply traumatized. You had one individual spoke of a case, I was 4 or 5 years old, and we haven't settled the fact that the painful past that this city has endured around policing. It is incumbent upon all of us to ensure that people feel served and protected, and to have a transparent process that allows for, again, the most egregious accusations, to have a transparent, open process. That's what the outcome that we want. And if there are ways and ideas that you all have that can make for a better, stronger, safer Chicago, leave your suggestions with Ronnie.
But if there were no changes, you'd be okay with that?
Thank you for your questions.
That was a question.
You asked 3 of them. This is your 4th one. I've already answered them, okay? Thank you.
It's a pretty important question.
Hi, Mayor.
Hey,
I reported this week that just less than 30% of the city's ARPA dollars have been spent through the end of 2023. Does that present a political problem for you as you ask voters in just a couple of weeks to raise the city's real estate transfer tax to fund services to help Chicago's unhoused, when there's millions of dollars that the city has earmarked and appropriated for just that purpose that has not yet been spent?
so first of all, I'm going to spend all that money. I can assure you that. And we're going to make sure that the communities who've been impacted the most by gross disinvestment, that those dollars reach those communities. As you also know, I've committed $250 million to the unhoused. For the first time in the history of Chicago, we're going to have a chief homelessness officer to make sure that resources actually get to the neighborhoods and to the people who are most impacted by, unfortunately, the long history of disinvestment in this city. So we're going to spend the ARPA dollars. Our budget director, as you may know, came with me from the county side, and we're taking those best practices that we developed on that side of the building, and we're certainly going to implement them here.
What do you say to Chicagoans who might not fully understand the whole debate over arbitration or not arbitration, but get the sense that Chicago police officers are unwilling to be held publicly accountable for serious allegations for misconduct? You've said that you feel an obligation to help restore the trust Chicagoans have in the police department. How is that possible when they're fighting something like this that you said is so crucial to transparency?
The voters of Chicago, they know what's at stake here. But they voted for me because they trust that I'm going to provide leadership in this moment, and today we displayed that leadership. So despite the pushback and the argument that is coming from a handful of people, the city of Chicago is clear that in order to restore, and in many cases, not even just restore, just build trust, having an open, transparent process, that's what the people of Chicago deserve and they want. And they have a leader who is committed to that. And I've enjoyed serving in this capacity for these first 10 months. It's truly been my honor. Thank you, Chicago.
Hi, Mayor. Could we return to the migrant issue?
Of course.
This is the second time that you and the governor's office seem to disagree on how things are going to play out to care for the situation. This time specifically, are you saying the governor's staff is lying when they say you committed to $70 million? It's very confusing to figure out why would they say after multiple meetings the city committed to $70 million and now the city says no.
Well, I don't know where the disagreement really exists here. The commitment to the mission is what we're all in agreement with. And what I've said repeatedly is that there's an entire operation that must be considered here. How we educate, how we provide.
But they have numbers. Why are those numbers not jibing with what you're saying? 70 million. I mean, were you in the meeting or was somebody else in the meeting? What's the disconnect?
There is no disconnect. And yes, I was in the meeting. There are a number of matters that need to be worked through. It's not just about financial resources. As I've said before, right now the city of Chicago is solely responsible for providing emergency temporary shelter. We're solely responsible for that. We're solely responsible for feeding migrants, staffing. I've renegotiated multiple times to ensure that the staffing model is made up of individuals who are local. So just,
what about looking forward? All this money.
how about you give me an opportunity to answer the question, okay? Just be patient with me. It's a virtue. There's 9 of them, by the way. I think I said 7. There are 9 fruits of the Spirit and 9 gifts of the Holy Spirit. So my pastor challenged me on that. So in order for us to move forward, we have to understand what we're doing right now. That's called smart leadership. Now, I know people just want to rush to judgment. I get that. But I have the responsibility to make sure that we build an operation that is built around people's humanity. And that's why I'm speaking specifically about how we house migrants, a temporary emergency shelter. Remember the state made a commitment to 2,000 beds back in November. Do you remember that?
Yes.
All right. So all of those details are still being worked through. It's not just simply about finding financial resources. It's about building an entire operation. For the first time in the history of the world, a local municipality has been asked to establish, build, maintain, and operate a migrant resettlement. That has never happened. And so here's what we've learned over the course of my first 10 months in office, that you have to feed, you have to temporarily house, you have to provide health care, you have to educate, transportation, resettle. This is an entire operation.
Jump the gun? Did they jump the gun by issuing this press release?
Look, the state of Illinois, as well as Cook County, made a commitment. And I'm grateful to have their partnership. That's a good thing, you all. The state of Illinois, Cook County, the city of Chicago, all working together to respond to this international crisis that, quite frankly, everybody knows is a federal responsibility. And so has it placed some stress on our local municipalities? Of course it has. But this is not something that has broken our spirit. It hasn't. And so we're going to continue to work with every single level of government, including the federal government, because they are solely responsible for this. This is not just simply about what the state does, the county does, or the city does. This is about who should be doing what. And the federal government continues to sit on their hands while democratic cities are being overwhelmed because someone is using people as leverage. And we all know who that person is.
Mayor, I hate to continue to pound on this issue, but you're committed to the mission. You've said that over and over again, but the mission requires money to make it happen. There's $71 million out there that still needs to be covered by the city. Is the city going to fund that money to do your part of the mission?
So I'm going to continue to do my part of the mission. I am.
But we're talking about the money, Mayor. Can you please just answer the issue whether there is going to be 71 committed by the city to cover the city's part of the mission, or are you saying, no, the Fed's got to cover that?
$51 million I went before the
Mayor, we heard that. Can you please answer the question? Well, I'm asking a question that I'm not getting an answer for.
Well,
I'd like to, if we could get an answer to whether 71 million will be committed by the city for this part of the mission after the state and the county committed theirs, yes or no?
So I've appropriated $51 million from the very beginning. I took that first vote. No one had to stand next to me. I did it. I then appropriated another $150 million and then went back again for a third time for $95 million. There's an entire operation that we have to consider here. Now, look, I know you want to have a petite form of a debate, but there's a broader context here. The broader context requires us to see the full operation in its totality, and that's what I'm doing.
Thank you. I'm also going to ask about the migrant crisis, but also touch on Heather's reporting as well. So you have about $400 million left in ARPA funds. I know that the city has said previously that you don't plan on spending any of that additional money on the migrant crisis like you did with that $95 million. But I mean, again, why not just go ahead and spend that money on the migrant crisis now? Like, is there a political debate within City Hall around doing that?
We have not debated how the rest of the ARPA dollars should be spent. What we have discussed, however, is that the ARPA dollars have an opportunity to reach communities that have been historically disinvested in. And that's what my commitment is with the ARPA.
So what does that mean exactly? Because I feel like what you're alluding to is maybe the fight that's gone on in City Council, which is that communities that have historically, not been invested in have been Chicago's existing Black and Brown communities. And it feels like maybe once again, this is pitting funding against Chicago's existing Black community and these new migrants who are coming in.
Yeah. What the pandemic did, it exposed us. It exposed the failures of government. And so, I do know that there are some individuals that feed off of the divisive nature of politics. But ensuring that ARPA dollars get to the neighborhoods that have been historically denied access to housing, access to good paying jobs. That's important to me. And it's important to the people of Chicago. And I'm going to work hard like I've done these first 10 months to ensure that the dollars reach the neighborhoods.
And so, again, just to be clear, you have absolutely no plans to use any more ARPA money to aid this crisis right now.
To be absolutely clear, the ARPA dollars were designed and set up to get to the neighborhoods. And I'm going to work very hard to ensure that happens.
That's not like yes or no on that, though.
So again, so then you can draw your own conclusions there. Look, if you want a very simplistic form of government, perhaps that's a place for a student council in third grade. For the city of Chicago, with all of the complexities that we deal with every single day, I've said repeatedly that the dollars must go to the neighborhoods. And that's what I've done as a Cook County Commissioner. That's what we're working towards as we set up more opportunities for those dollars to actually reach the community.
Hey, Mayor, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Glad to hear that. I just simply want to ask, does the $70 million account for people that are going to be coming up into the DNC? And where is that $70 million going to come from? Do you know?
So I actually I appreciate the framing of that question. I do. It's a good question. So right now we have just under 13,000 people in shelter that the city of Chicago is solely responsible for. We actually don't know how many more buses are going to come as we lead up to the DNC. That's the type of sophistication that I was hoping that people would understand. That to talk about a single number without fully knowing all of the complexities that relate to this mission is, it's short-sighted. Now, again, we can make projections, right? That's not unreasonable. And last summer, there were 30 buses coming a day. The discussions that we have had between the state and the county have been centered around providing temporary shelter for a smaller number than I'm currently responsible for right now. So there could be a situation where whatever number that is being floated right now, that may not be enough. That's the reality here. You have a governor in the state of Texas that is determined to cause harm. And so I appreciate the frame of the question because we have to consider the full operation. And right now, that has not been fully determined.
And then just a follow-up to that, I know that lately there's been fewer people who are in city shelter as people move out, which is a good thing. Is there ever going to be a reconsideration of maybe consolidating some of those shelters to save money in the long run?
Yes. Yes.
Hi, Mayor. Of that state.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Wonderful, thank you.
Of the state and county funding, the state said the $102 million would be proposed in the governor's fiscal year 2025 budget proposal. You know, what will the city do until then? Is the city dollars currently budgeted? Is that enough to last the city at least through July, or do you anticipate funding will run out before then?
Well, as it stands, I think everyone has reported on the number that I've made available of what we're spending per day. At the current rate, the $150 million that we've appropriated, the city of Chicago alone will have a difficult time responding to this crisis in the event, and in all likelihood, the event that we don't get a comprehensive immigration reform package that provides more support at the border, that if the governor of Texas continues his path of destruction, that is going to be an incredible burden for the city of Chicago. And so you're absolutely right to raise that. And, you know, again, my responsibility at this point is to do our very best with the resources that we have to continue to provide this operation and this mission with a real humanitarian approach. And we do need the federal government to do more. We do. And again, I'm grateful that the state of Illinois and the county are going back, at least in the case of President Preckwinkle, going back to her body. I do appreciate that. And I do appreciate that the governor is willing now to go to his body directly. But, you know, our conversations are not over. We're going to continue to have conversations so that we meet this moment.
Also, you know, on the Bring Chicago Home referendum, you know, opponents have been arguing it could deter new construction and new housing from being built. To combat that, one researcher, he suggested that for the first sale of a new development, that be exempted from the tax applying if it occurs within the first 10 years of construction. Do you support adding exemptions like that to try and ensure housing continues to be constructed as well? You know,
I'm not familiar with that particular proposal. You know, what I will say, though, is, look, everyone knows, you know, what's at stake here. And what's at stake here is the fact that we have a crisis that has been unaddressed by previous administrations. And my administration made a commitment to address the unhoused crisis in Chicago. When you have 1 in 4 1 in 4 black children in the Chicago public schools will experience homelessness over time as a Chicago public school student. That's unconscionable. And so making sure and ensuring, much like what I've already done by, we're going to hire really soon a chief homelessness officer, $250 million into the unhoused, making sure that we're putting dollars towards violence prevention. It's a holistic approach, and building more affordable housing. All of that is a part of my plan as mayor of the city of Chicago, of which we're already moving in a very aggressive way to ensure that that plan comes to fruition. And in the instance of this particular ballot referendum, what is it, 93% of people will actually have a tax reduction. 93% will have a tax reduction. 70% of those who are unhoused in the city of Chicago are black people. Like that's not okay. So I do appreciate whatever spirit in which this person is looking to provide perhaps other possibilities, but the main goal is to address the unhoused in the city of Chicago. And I made a commitment to doing that, and I've honored my word, because I believe it's important that as mayor of the city of Chicago, you honor your word. And everything that I said I was going to do, I've done it. I believe in telling people the truth.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
A lot has been made about whether Chicago police will be prepared for an end to the ShotSpotter technology. Can you talk about what steps you've taken or what steps need to be taken in detail to prepare police officers for that change whenever it does happen?
Well, Superintendent Snelling and I have been in constant conversations about this form of technology. And so, as far as the specific details at this time, I don't know if I want to go into those specifics right now, but what I can say is that I've been clear from the very beginning that ensuring that public safety is met with the full force of government. Our community safety plan, which focuses on people, places, and partnerships, and our Deputy Mayor Garen Gatewood has done an amazing job bringing people together. What we're ultimately preparing for, without getting into too many of the specifics, what does community safety look like without just simply a police response? Because we're asking police officers to do too much. And that's why we're working with the business community, the philanthropic community, community-based organizations, my administration, to fund critical services to ensure that we're preventing violence. Because that's the ultimate goal. We don't want to just simply react to something that happened. We want to prevent those acts from happening. You all know I live on the west side of Chicago, Austin, beautiful community, and the first mayor likely in the history of Chicago to wake up in one of the most violent neighborhoods in the entire city of Chicago. No one thinks about this more than I do. And so we're working with the superintendent to build out our strategy, as we've already laid out our public safety plan, our community safety plan, but build out a strategy that moves us away from this particular form, but also looking towards the future. And the future really is going to require a full force, a comprehensive approach to address this matter. The last thing that I'll say is the ultimate plan is we have to do in the city of Chicago what safe cities do around America. And the safest cities in America all have one thing in common. They invest in people. That's the full strategy, to invest in people. That's why in my budget, I added an additional $76 million to youth employment. We've already seen a 20% increase in youth employment. 25,000 young people that were hired. We're going to hire additional 4,000. So we're going to get close to almost 30,000 young people that we're hiring this summer. Now, that's on top of the work that the philanthropic community and the business community has committed to doing as well. Hiring young people, making sure we're creating affordable housing, stabilizing our education system so that people actually have a right to exist in the very neighborhoods in which they're being raised in, and that includes all public accommodations. That is part of the more comprehensive plan, but again, I don't want to get into too many of the specifics.
Is the city considering any other type of gunshot?
No.
Okay.
On the same subject, so I'm a little confused. So does Spot Shutter end tomorrow?
From the very beginning.
Yes or no?
So I
But it's a yes or no question. Does it end tomorrow?
It may be a yes or no question for you, but I would respectfully ask your question and allow me to answer the question the way in which I want to.
Okay.
Okay, just respectfully. I don't dictate how you, but just for a second, I don't dictate how you ask a question. So please don't dictate how I answer a question, okay? So here's what I've been clear about from the very beginning. I made a commitment, and I've honored that commitment. And then we've also provided a runway that allows for the police department, community organizations, and the full comprehensive approach that we are building towards building a better, stronger, safer Chicago, that we have an opportunity to transition away from it. The contract, of course, we know when the day that the contract ends, that there's no secret there. But I've been clear from the very beginning that retiring and moving away from this particular form of technology while providing a runway is what I've said. That's the understanding that you all should work with, and I'll leave it at that.
But again, I mean, if the company itself is not willing to negotiate
That's
an
not
extension.
my understanding. That's not my understanding.
So the company is willing to negotiate an extension.
Listen, I've been clear from the very beginning
Okay.
of what I've committed to. I've been clear from the very beginning.
So if you want to provide a runway, then why didn't you announce this 3 months ago and provide that runway for the past 3 months, and then it would just end tomorrow?
Because I wanted to do it this way.
So are you doing it this way because you're concerned about the violence over the summer?
No. I'm doing it this way because this is the right way to do it. Now, if you're asking me if I'm concerned about violence as a whole, whether it's the summertime or the wintertime, like I don't pick seasons when I'm concerned about violence. And listen, I want to make sure that that's very clear, that violence in the city of Chicago is something that we've been plagued with for a very long time. Now, despite the fact that shootings are going down and homicides are going down, there's still a lot of work to be done. But this had more to do with providing all parties who were involved, those who were advocating for the immediate ending of this contract, and the company itself that, as well as our police department, that needed some time. And so that's what I've been clear about, and I'm still clear about that.
So I was told the police department was not part of your decision because Superintendent Snelling supports this, all of law enforcement supports using this technology. They call it a very effective tool. So were they part of your decision to end ShotSpotter?
I've been in conversations with everyone. I speak to the superintendent and his department. We sit down every week. I speak to the superintendent on a regular basis. So again, I've been very clear from the very beginning, and we're going to continue to hold to the commitment that I've made.
Hey, Mayor. Back here. Was it a mistake to announce that you were ending that contract and then extending it in a sense through September without a deal in place to actually extend it through September? The company now appears to have some leverage to say, hey, we're turning this off on Friday unless you agree to the terms of our deal.
I've been clear from the very beginning, so I don't know where you're getting your information from, but I've always been clear about how my administration was going to engage in this process, and then to make sure that there is an opportunity for the Chicago Police Department to draw down from the reliance upon of this particular form of technology.
And then on the migrant funding, your staff and the staff from the county and the governor's office have been meeting for weeks and months, and you guys had that meeting last week with Governor Pritzker and President Preckwinkle. They walked out of that meeting believing that you had a deal in place for $321 million in extra funding. The state would provide 50% of that, and the county and city would provide 25%. Are you at all concerned that they walked out of a meeting believing there was a deal that you now say you never made a commitment to?
I'm not aware of what you are asserting. I'm not aware of that. So whatever understanding that you all might have about what was discussed in that meeting, because none of you were in that meeting. None of you were. So all I could, let's keep a little decorum, okay? All right, just respectfully, you all.
Respectfully,
All right, you all done? All right. So again, no one in the city of Chicago or the state of Illinois or this country is questioning my commitment to this mission. So whatever for... All right, let's get to the next question here. You all, I would hope that you all would have just respect for your colleagues who have not asked a question yet, okay? Now, I'm trying my best to be patient here, respectfully, but it's becoming quite hostile. The next question?
ask a question.
No, he's not. He's not. It's not an answer. We're getting obfuscation. We're not getting answers.
Out of respect to those who have not asked a question, let's go to the next question, please.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
On ShotSpotter, is a contract extension approved by Sound Thinking? And then secondly, with your messaging on decommissioning the technology and sort of dovetailing it, bookending it around after the DNC, why did you give that framework?
Yeah, the police department needed some time. I've said that multiple times now. The police department, our local police department, needed some time. You've had an entire infrastructure built around this particular form of technology. I believe that's what the people of Chicago want from their mayor. Look, again, I know there's been very abrupt decisions that have been made historically. I am working hard to avoid that trend. Maybe it just shows a loving, caring side that maybe people are not accustomed to. There were people who believed one particular way and people who believed another particular way. I brought those interests together. And so I've been clear from the very beginning that moving away and transitioning out is what I've made my commitment towards. And that commitment is still in place.
I think we hear you there, but this runway that you want, has Sound Thinking agreed to it?
I've been clear from the very beginning. And I'm still clear. Those conversations that we've had over time have led us to this decision. And so I'm clear about the decision and we're going to hold to it.
Hey, Mayor. Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, Jay.
Hey, so just to clarify on that last question, so Sound Thinking has agreed to an extension here?
One more time. I've been clear from the very beginning. I've been clear. And so you have...
I understand.
We wouldn't be asking the question over and over again.
Okay, just hold on a second, Ronnie. Just hold on a second. Jake, I'm going to answer your question. We're going to try to stay focused here, despite the disruption. When I've had conversations with those who operate and run ShotSpotter, from the very beginning, we were clear about what I've already announced. That is still in place. What I said and what we're doing, what I've been absolutely clear about, providing this extension in this runway, it provides our law enforcement with time to move away from a system that they've relied upon for a very long time. And I believe that's a sensitive, right thing to do.
Good afternoon, Mayor. I'll
Good
be quick.
afternoon.
First question, if the city isn't considering a gunshot detection alternative to ShotSpotter, then what should replace it? Will it still be a form of surveillance technology?
Well, and thank you for that question. As I've said, the violence that we experience in Chicago is horrific. And though shootings are down, homicides are down, there's still a lot of work to be done. My plan and my vision for the city of Chicago is comprehensive. It's going to take more than what has been done to get to the results that I'm committed to see come to fruition. And so investing in people is our best pathway forward. Now, are there other technological advances, that I may not be aware of that provide a non-police response to respond to emergency? Because 40% of the calls that come through are mental health crises. There could be some forms of technology that can give us a response so that EMT can show up and mental health crisis providers can show up. I'm not aware of any. But again, the approach here is to build a comprehensive approach. And that's what we've done. And so I don't want us to fall into the trap and the behavior of old, where we only look at policing as the only form to build a better, stronger, safer Chicago.
And on the subject,
No, it's your turn.
On the subject of migrant funding, how much runway does this $250 million give the city's shelter apparatus? Specifically, does it stave off the chance of budget cuts or shelters closing mid-year?
Well, as I've said before, we have to size our shelters that allow for the financial restraints that I've been very clear about. Is this going to help us? Absolutely. But the goal is to ultimately challenge the federal government to do its part, because local municipalities are not designed and built to be able to hold this type of operation. So the support that we are receiving from the state and the county, and all the support that we've received up to this point, the people of Chicago are very appreciative of it. But it's really going to take the federal government to really do what it's done in the past with other crises of this magnitude. And so that's what our work we have to continue our work to ensure that the federal government does its part.
But ballpark, end of summer?
Oh.
Will it last until the end of summer, do you think?
Well, again, I appreciate the question. This was asked earlier. Look, the governor of Texas is determined to cause chaos and harm. So it's a fair question. What I can tell you, though, is because there are things that we cannot control. And those things that we cannot control are in the state of Texas. And so depending on what the federal government is able to do to provide more border support, that ultimately will determine what our capacity ultimately is, and then how much runway, as you're asking, will those additional resources provide us. All right, is that everybody? Thank you all very much.